There is a kind of hunger that has no name in any language spoken by the living. It does not burn the way fire burns. It does not ache the way grief aches. It simply waits, the way deep water waits, patient and still and absolute, until something warm and breathing steps too close to the edge. Adewole was 26 years old the first time he heard her voice, and he did not know then that hearing it would cost him everything he had ever loved. He was not a careless man. That is important to understand. He was not the kind of young man who laughed at warnings or rolled his eyes when the elders spoke. He had been raised in Adewole, a village pressed between the forest and the river ocean, where the old ways were not superstition, they were instruction. Where the boundary between the world of the living and the world that existed just beneath the surface of things was not a metaphor. It was a geography. It had edges. It had rules. The first rule every child in Adewole learned before they learned to swim was this: do not go to the river after the sun has set its chin on the horizon. Not because the current is stronger at night. Not because the crocodiles are bolder. But because that hour, that thin, golden, dissolving hour, belongs to them. To the ones who live beneath. And they do not share it willingly. Adewole had kept that rule for 26 years. He broke it on a Tuesday in the dry season, and he broke it for the most ordinary reason in the world. He broke it because of cassava. His mother had sent him to the riverside farm to check on the harvest, and he had lingered too long arguing with his cousin Ton about something neither of them could remember an hour later, and by the time he started back toward the village the sky had gone from orange to a deep bruised purple and the first stars were already pushing through. He was not afraid. He told himself he was not afraid. He was a grown man, not a child who ran from shadows. He would take the shortcut along the riverbank, walk fast, not look at the water, be home before his mother had finished worrying. He was almost past the sharpest bend in the river, the place the old woman called Oju Omi, the eye of the water, when he heard it. Not a voice, exactly. Not at first. More like the memory of a voice. Like something his ears recognized before his mind did, the way you sometimes know a song before you remember where you heard it. He stopped. The river was moving. Of course it was moving. Rivers always move. But there was something else in the sound of it, something threaded through the water noise like a second current running in a different direction, and without meaning to, without deciding to, Adewole turned and looked. She was standing waist deep in the shallows, and she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, and he knew immediately, the way you know certain things in the place below thought, that she was not a woman. She was looking at him. Not the way a person looks at a stranger. Not with surprise or weariness or the careful assessment of someone trying to decide if you are threat or friend. She was looking at him the way you look at something you have been waiting for. With recognition. With a patience so deep it had its own weight. You are late, she said. Her voice was low and even and it moved through his chest the way bass notes from a drum move through a chest, not heard so much as felt. Adewole said, and then said nothing else, because there was nothing else available to him. I have been watching you walk this bank for 3 seasons, she said. You always turn back before this bend. I should go, he said. His feet did not move. She tilted her head. Her hair floated around her shoulders in the water even though no current should have been moving it. Should you? Yes, he said. Then go, she said. He went. He ran the last half-mile home with his heart beating so hard he could feel it in his teeth, and he did not tell his mother what he had seen, and he did not tell Ton, and he did not tell anyone because he was not sure himself what exactly he had seen, and also because some part of him, a part he would spend the next 3 months trying to silence, already wanted to go back. He went back on a Friday. He told himself he was checking on the farm again. He told himself a lot of things that month. He was very good at it. She was there. She was sitting on the flat rock at the water's edge this time, and she was dressed in white, and she looked up when she heard his footsteps on the bank like she had been expecting him, which she had been. You came back, she said. I shouldn't be here, he said. No, she agreed pleasantly. You shouldn't. He sat down on the bank a careful distance from her, close enough to speak, far enough to tell himself he was maintaining a boundary, and they talked until the stars were thick overhead and the night insects were loud around them, and she told him her name was Adewole, and he told her his, and she laughed at something he said and the sound of it moved over the water like light, and Adewole Adisa, who was not a careless man, left that night knowing he would come back again. He came back every week. Then twice a week. Then he lost count of how many times, because he stopped counting. His mother noticed first, the way mothers always notice first. "You are not sleeping," she said one morning, studying his face over the breakfast fire. "I am fine, Mama." "You are not fine. You are somewhere else even when you are here." She touched his face. "What has gotten into you, my son?" "Nothing," he said. "I am tired from the farm." She let it go. She should not have let it go, but she did, because she loved him, and love sometimes makes us accept the answers we want to be true. Ton was less gentle. "You have been going to the river at night," Ton said one evening, appearing at Adewole's doorway with the directness of someone who had been walking up to a confrontation. Adewole looked up from where he was sitting. "Who told you that?" "Nobody had to tell me. I followed you." Silence. Ton. "I saw her," Ton said, and his voice was different now. The challenge had left it. What was left sounded like fear wearing the clothes of anger. "I saw what she is, Adewole. I know what she is. We all know what she is. Everyone in this village knows there is something in that water at Oju Omi, and we leave it alone because we are not stupid. You don't know what you saw. I know exactly what I saw." Ton stepped into the room. "My father's uncle went to that bend of the river 40 years ago and they found him 3 days later on the bank. Empty. You understand what I am saying to you? He was breathing but he was empty. Whatever he was before, the laughter, the sharp mind, the stories, gone. Like something had taken up residence in his body and forgotten to bring the man with it." He grabbed Adewole's shoulder. "She is not a woman. Stop going there." Adewole looked at his cousin's hand on his shoulder and then looked at his cousin's face and he said, "She is not hurting me." Ton released him slowly. "Not yet," he said. "That is not the same thing as never." He left. Adewole sat alone in the room for a long time after that, and he thought about what Ton had said, and he thought about the man found empty on the bank, and he thought about Adewolle's laugh and the way she said his name like it was a word in a language she had invented just for him, and then he got up and went to the river. "You seem troubled," she said when he arrived. "Someone saw us," he said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Are you afraid of what they will say?" "I'm afraid of what they know," he said honestly. She looked at the water. She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again her voice had changed slightly, not colder, but older. Like a door had opened somewhere inside it. "What do they know?" "They know you are not," he stopped. "Not what?" "Not like me." "No," she said softly. "I am not like you." She turned and looked at him with those eyes that saw too much. "Does that change something?" "It should," he said. "But does it?" He said nothing. She nodded once, like his silence had confirmed something she already understood. "Then sit down, Adewole. Sit down and stop fighting what your feet keep bringing you back to." He sat. He should not have sat. But he did, and they talked until the water turned silver with the approaching dawn, and he walked home with the birds beginning in the trees, and he felt, this is the word he would have used, the word he would have defended, he felt known. Seen in a way that had no equivalent in his waking life. Like she had put her hand directly into the chest of him and found the exact shape of what was there. The next person to disappear was a boy named Keod. Keod was 15, a farmer's son, clever and quick-footed, the kind of boy who made everyone around him feel slightly more alive. He had been going to the river for reasons no one understood until it was too late, whether drawn by the same current that pulled Adewole or by simple adolescent restlessness, no one could say. They found him on the 4th day. He was sitting under the almond tree at the edge of the village, breathing, alive in the technical sense of the word, staring at something no one else could see. He would not speak. He would not eat unless food was placed in his hands. His mother tried everything. The herbalist came. The pastor came. His father wept openly in the market square, which no one had ever seen him do. Keod stared at his invisible thing and said nothing. The village began to speak in low voices. They said Oju Omi. They said the old name for Adebole's type, the ones who lived in the deep places, who collected pieces of living people like some people collected cloth or stories. They said someone had been going to the river at night and bringing the river's attention back to their village like a man who carries an ember home in his pocket and then wonders why the house is burning. Nobody said Adewole's name. Not yet. But Ton looked at him across the compound and the look said everything. Adewole went to the river that night with the specific intention of ending it. He had rehearsed what he would say. He had his reasons lined up in a neat and reasonable order. He would tell her he could not come back. He would tell her that people were being hurt. He would tell her, and this was the part he kept returning to in the rehearsal, that whatever this was between them, however real it felt, it was costing too much. He arrived at Oju Omi and she was already standing, and she was not in white this time. She was wearing the color of deep water at night, and her expression when she saw him was something he had not seen on her face before. She looked tired. Not the tired of someone who had not slept. The tired of someone who had been awake for a very long time. You have come to leave me, she said. Adewole. Say what you came to say, she said. You have prepared it. Say it. A boy is gone, he said. Keod. He is 15 years old and he is sitting under a tree seeing nothing and his mother is out of her mind with. I know about Keod. The word stopped him cold. You know, he said. She did not look away. I know. Did you? He could not finish the sentence. No, she said. Not directly. But my attention has consequences I do not always intend. Things near me are affected by proximity. The way a fire does not intend to burn everything near it, but burns nonetheless. She paused. I am not innocent, Adewole. I have never told you I was innocent. He stood on the bank and looked at her, and he felt the world he had been constructing in his mind, the one where this was complicated but not wrong, where she was misunderstood rather than dangerous, begin to come apart in a way that was quiet and total, like a seam opening. What are you? He said. She looked at him for a long moment. Sit down, she said. Tell me what you are. Sit down and I will tell you everything. All of it. The things you have been not asking for 3 months because you were afraid of the answer. He sat. She settled across from him on the rock and she folded her hands in her lap with the composure of someone who has lived long enough to know that the truth, however heavy, is lighter than carrying it alone. My name before this name was not Adewole, she began. That name was given to me by the first man who saw me and needed something to call me, 400 years ago. My real name is in a language that has no living speakers. I was not born the way you were born. I came into being the way a river comes into being, gradually, from many sources, over a long time, until one day there is simply a river where before there was only rain and rock and wanting. She paused. I was a goddess once, she said. Not a great one. Not the kind your people make festivals for. A small one. A local one. The spirit of this bend in this river, the one who kept the fish running and the floods gentle and the children who fell in the water from drowning. I had worshippers. I had purpose. I had, her voice softened, I had a shape that fit the world I was in. What happened? Adewole said quietly. I loved a man, she said simply. A priest. Someone who was supposed to serve me, not be loved by me. I crossed a boundary that the older powers do not forgive. I was punished. Not destroyed, that would have been mercy. I was reduced. Stripped of my power to help, but not of my power to need. Left here in this water with all the hunger of what I was and none of the grace. She looked at her hands. That was 4 centuries ago. The night insects were very loud in the silence after she finished. And the men, Adewole said. The ones who were found empty. Keod. When someone stays near me long enough, she said, when I let myself care, what I am starts to move toward them the way water moves toward low ground. I cannot fully control it. I was not designed for this diminished form. There are leaks. She looked up at him. Your friend Keod came to the river on his own. He sat here for 2 hours when I was not paying attention, and 2 hours of my proximity, unsupervised, without me consciously trying to hold myself back. She stopped. I am sorry for Keod. I am genuinely, deeply sorry. It does not fix him. Adewole's throat was tight. And me. She held his gaze. You I have been very careful with. More careful than I have been with anyone in a very long time. Because, she paused, and for the first time since he had known her, something in her expression broke open. Because you reminded me of him. The priest. Not in your face. In the way you argue. In the way you sit with a problem and look at it from every side before you speak. In the way you laugh when something actually surprises you, like laughter is a reflex you haven't learned to suppress yet. She breathed in slowly. I have been alone in this water for 400 years, Adewole. Do you understand what that number means? Not lonely the way you get lonely after a long day with no one to talk to. Lonely the way a sound gets lonely after the thing that made it has been gone so long that even the echo has faded. I have watched this village rebuild itself 6 times. I have watched the forest come and go and come again. I have been here in this water, diminished and leaking and careful and alone, and then you walked around that bend in the dry season and stopped and looked at me and you were not afraid. Her voice cracked, just slightly. You were not afraid, and I should have sent you away that first night and I could not make myself do it. Adewole sat in the dark and felt something very large and very quiet move through him. If I stay, he said. If I keep coming here. You will lose things, she said immediately. I will not lie to you about that. Not the way Keod lost things. I would end myself before I let that happen to you. But there will be costs. Things that fray at the edges of your life. Connections that weaken. Your mother's sleep. Your cousin's peace. The village's sense of safety. My proximity is not harmless even at its most controlled. I am a broken thing, Adewole. Beautiful, perhaps, and genuinely fond of you, but broken in ways that leak. And if I leave, he said. Then you leave, she said. I will not follow you. I will not send anything after you. I will go back to being careful and alone in this water, which is what I have been doing for 400 years and which she stopped, which I am very tired of. She looked at him directly. I am not asking you to stay. I am telling you the truth about the choice so that if you make it knowing. That is all I have to offer you. The truth, and whatever this is between us, and 400 years of practice at waiting. The river moved around them. Somewhere in the village, a child cried and was soothed and went quiet. Adewole looked at the water. He looked at her face. He looked at his own hands on his knees and thought about Ton's voice saying not yet and his mother's hand on his cheek and Keod sitting under the almond tree staring at a world nobody else could enter. He thought about what she had said. I would end myself before I let that happen to you. He thought about 400 years. He stood up slowly. He stood up the way a man stands up when the decision has already been made somewhere below the level of thinking and the body is simply catching up to it. He looked at her one last time, the white dress, the floating hair, the eyes that had seen 6 versions of his village and had chosen to see him. I will come back tomorrow, he said. She went very still. I am not promising you forever, he said. I am a man, not a god, and I do not know what tomorrow will cost either of us. But I will come back tomorrow. And we will figure out what this is. She looked at him for a long time. You are a strange man, Adewole Adisa, she said. You have been watching me for 3 seasons, he said. You should have expected that. She smiled. It was the realest thing he had ever seen on a face. He walked home in the blue hour before dawn, and the birds were beginning again in the trees, and somewhere behind him the river moved over its stones with a sound like breathing, and he did not know, could not know, whether the choice he had just made was love or recklessness or some country in between that did not have a name yet. But he had made it. An Adewole sat on a rock at Oju Omi and pressed one hand flat against the water's surface and felt, for the first time in 400 years, the particular quality of silence that comes not from being alone but from having something to wait for. That is where the elders of Adewole end the story. Not with a resolution. Not with a warning, exactly. With that image, a woman who is older than memory pressing her hand to the water, and the water, very slightly, warming. Because some stories are not about whether the choice was right or wrong. Some stories are about the fact that the choice was made. That a man looked at something ancient and broken and dangerous and said, I will come back tomorrow. That something ancient and broken and dangerous looked back and let itself believe him. The river is still there if you want to find it. The bend at Oju Omi still exists. And if you go there at that thin golden dissolving hour when the sun sets its chin on the horizon, the old people will tell you to keep walking. Most people do. But every generation, there is someone who stops and listens. If this story found you tonight and held you till the end, you already know what it means. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling me, should Adewole have stayed, or should he have walked away? I want to read every single answer. And if you want more stories that live in that place between the world you know and the one moving just underneath it, subscribe and stay close. The river has more to say.